Then moving on to another prestigious project by ISRO, which will be taken up soon, that is the Gaganyaan mission. Right. Right. So the moment you're talking about the case of Gaganyaan, it is it is the first human space flight program of ISRO. The first human space flight program of ISRO. The first human space flight program. Now, the moment you're talking about the case of your space exploration or as a case of your space expedition, so till now, right from its inception, that is right from 1972 when the foundation for INCOSPAR was laid, right from the formation of INCOSPAR in 1972 till the year 2023 or still today's date. So ISRO has successfully carried out many number of scientific explorations, many number of scientific expeditions, like you're talking like Chandrayaan 1 or as a case of your Chandrayaan 3 or as a case of your Mangalyaan. At the same time, we have sent even various satellites, whether you're calling it as Earth Observatory or as a case of your remote sensing satellites or as a case of your communication satellites, the different satellites for various purposes. And as on today's date, we can say that, we can very much proudly say that India is having the maximum number of remote sensing satellites which are already placed in various orbits. That may be the case of your LEO, that may be the case of your polar orbits, or as a case of sun synchronizing orbit, SSO orbits, could be any particular thing, but we are having the maximum number of remote sensing satellites. But the moment you talk about the case of the human space flight programs, so till now, ISRO hasn't sent any particular human beings into space. So we have Indians who entered into space. You talk about the case of Rakesh Sharma, an Indian who has been into space. And then after that, when you talk about the Indian born persons, you talk about Kalpana Chawla, you talk about the case of your Sunita Williams, or as a case of your Bandla Sirisha, the Indian borns who have been into space. Right. Now this is one particular prestigious project by ISRO wherein they are planning to send human beings into the space. So the problem there lies is sending the human beings into space is not a big deal. We can send them very easily. But the problem is bringing them back to the ground safely. That is what is most the important part, or is a crucial part. The reason why, now when these particular spacecraft start re-entering into the Earth space, they have to overcome huge amount of frictional forces. Now it is because of these particular frictional forces, the spacecraft in which they travel, there are many number of possibilities that these particular spacecrafts may melt down, may burn out completely. Now one particular example already we have seen. Already the world has already experienced one particular thing. Right? NASA has experienced one thing in which we have lost Kalpana Chawla. Right? So there are many such incidences like that. So as on today's date, ISRO is doing many number of activities, many number of researches, many number of plannings, many number of activities to bring these particular research science, to bring these particular astronauts back to the ground safely. Now in the recent times, I'm just talking about the last 2 months or 3 months, in the recent times, ISRO has signed MOUs even with IIT Madras. So that particular understanding, that particular MOU is regarding the space capsule in which they are going to travel. the designing of that particular space capsule. At the same time, ISRO has signed MOU even with Indian Air Force, Indian Navy has signed an MOU even with Indian Navy also. Now, why the Indian Navy is coming into picture? Now, these particular astronauts, the moment they land into Bay of Bengal, so as per the scheduled program, as on today's date, they say that, so the astronauts definitely, the space capsule in which they are going to travel, definitely it is going to splash down in Bay of Bengal. Now, the moment talking about the case of a Bay of Bengal, part of the Bay of Bengal belongs to India. You can say Indian waters to a certain extent. At the same time, the Bangladeshi waters to a certain extent. Myanmar waters to a certain extent. At the same time, the other part of that one is international rivers, international zone, or else international waters you call it as. Now, the question is that, now these particular astronauts, they are, as on today's day's program, they are supposed to land in Indian waters in Bay of Bengal. Now, for instance, suppose that they land in international waters, then in that particular case, it is the responsibility of the Indian Navy to bring all these particular astronauts back to the main center safely without any sort of incidents or any particular incidents. The thing is that these astronauts have to be brought safely back to the space center. Our responsibility about the Indian Navy. At the same time, when we are trying to launch the orders, when we are trying to send these astronauts into space, we need to have the different technologies here. So one particular technology is related to the case of the selection of the astronauts. Who is fit? Who is not fit? Right? Now, the moment you say Indian Air Force pilots or all the Indian Air Force pilots fit for that one, so maybe, may not be. Maybe, may not be. Now, why I'm using the word may not be? So there in that particular case, the technical competence is also required there. Right. So in order to carry out research activities even in space also, they need to have certain amount of scientific inclination. They need to have certain amount of technical competence. Now, unless and until they have this technical competence or as a case of scientific attitude, they cannot be sent. That is one particular thing. Of course, physical fitness, it is mandatory. That's a different thing. Right. So, for selection of the astronauts, for the training of the astronauts, so the moment you're talking about the training of the astronauts, what they are supposed to do in the space, what they are not supposed to do in space, what they are supposed to do in space, regarding all these particular things, they have to be trained for that one. And that particular training program will be given to the Indian astronauts by Russia. To be more clear, Roscosmos, the Russian space agency, they will be training the Indian astronauts. At the same time, as a part of the training program, the selected Indian astronauts will be sent into space from Russian space agency. Right? So from Russian space station, once they'll go into the space, and after that one, right. Sanjay, the thing is there in that particular case is, you're talking about the craters of the south pole of the moon. The moment you're talking about the craters, so craters are the regions where once upon a time we had a huge impact between any particular asteroid and the moon, or else between a meteor and the moon. So it is because of the collision between the meteor and the moon, some craters have formed. That is the thing. Now the question is that, one particular question from the online student, the question is that, if at all the south pole of the moon is not receiving the sun's rays at all, then what is the use of the solar panel? The south pole of the moon is not at all receiving the sun's rays. Then in that particular case, how you are going to provide energy for that particular rover, for that particular lander using the solar panels? So in case of your Luna 25, in case of Luna 25, the energy for that particular thing is provided using two different things. One is the nuclear radioisotopes, and the other one is a case of your solar energy, or is a case of your solar panels. But whereas in case of your the Chandrayaan 3, the lander and the rover, the energy is provided utilizing only the case of your solar panels only. So there in that particular case, first and foremost thing is that the energy can be stored. So in case of your solar panels, one advantage is that the energy can be stored, because whatever is the energy that is stored using the solar, it is always a case of a direct current, which are calling it as DC. So the advantage in case of DC is that DC can be stored, but wherein AC can never be stored. That is the disadvantage in the case of AC. But at the same time, AC is having advantage that it can be used for long distance transmission, but wherein DC cannot be used for long distance transmission. That is the main disadvantage. So there in the case of your Chandrayaan 3, the moment you are using the solar panels, so that particular solar panels, so there in that case you have already stored some amount of energy there that will be utilized, and at the same time, if the sun's rays reach that particular part of the moon, there in that case we are not talking about the craters. We are not talking about the craters. I am talking about the surface of the moon. So suppose that if the surface of the moon is receiving some amount of sunlight, then in that particular case, the energy can be generated. Craters are those areas which are formed because of impact. A particular place, how it is. For that thing, you are using these things. Right. So coming back here. So the moment talking about the case of your Gaganyaan, for the training purpose, for selection purpose, at the same time, the case of your what to do, what not to do in case of your space, Russia is providing the training program. At the same time, as a part of the training program, these particular selected Indian astronauts will be going into space from the Russian space station. They will be in the space for some time, maybe for 3 days or 5 days, and after coming back, and again they will be going back into the space from Sriharikota. It means that as a part of the Gaganyaan mission, all the selected astronauts will be going into the space twice, not once. Once during the training program, and the other one as a part of Gaganyaan mission from Sriharikota. At the same time, there is another MOU by ISRO. So the another MOU is with the case of your France Space Agency. Now regarding the France Space Agency, the MOU is regarding the space medicine. The space medicine. What they are supposed to have during that particular 3 days or 5 days or 7 days, whatever is the time. So heroes date low, as on today's date, you have got some speculations. Some people say 5 days under, some people say 7 days under, but what is the exact number, we don't know that one as on today's date. Take it for granted, it may be 5, maybe for 7 days. Now assume that they are staying in the space for a period of 5 days, then in that particular case, 5 days while these calls of food empty. Definitely they cannot carry Hyderabad biryani from here. Is there any possibility that they can carry Hyderabad biryani from here? There is no possibility. So what they are supposed to have in that particular place? Nothing but the case of some small capsules which are going to provide them some enough amount of energy. That is what you are calling it as a space medicine in the end. Right? So regarding this particular Gaganyaan mission, ISRO has developed many number of devices. There is one particular thing which you call it as the space capsule recovery experiment. There is one particular thing which is known as the pad abort test. At different stages, at different points, suppose that if something or the other takes place. So launch site lone and the launch site and Sriharikota. Sriharikota lo, for example, launch site lone take off out on a time low. If something happens, then in that particular case, how they are supposed to escape from that one. At the same time, suppose that if at all, the moment you are talking about the case of your re-entry, the moment this particular spacecraft is trying to re-enter into the case of your Earth's atmosphere, now at that particular point of time, suppose if something happens, then in that particular case, all these particular astronauts need to exit from that particular spacecraft safely. So for that particular thing, what they are going to do for that particular thing. Alright. So here in this particular case, you talk about the case of the different things. So this is the proposed Gaganyaan mission project. The proposed Gaganyaan mission project, wherein so they are going to take off from this particular place. So this is the place from where nothing but the case of here Satish Dhawan Space Center, and this is the space capsule in which they are going to stay for a period of 5 days or else for a period of around 7 days, whatever is the time period. At the same time, at this particular place, now this is at a height of around 400 kilometers. Means which orbit? 400 kilometers indicates which orbit? Nothing but a case of your Leo orbit. So this particular spacecraft is going to stay in the Leo orbit for around 5 days or 7 days at a height of around 400 kilometers. And then after that one, from this particular point, the reverse journey of this one will commence, or the reverse journey will start taking place. Now at this particular point, you can say this. So when this particular point is trying to re-enter into the Earth's atmosphere, there will be a huge amount of friction. Now that is the reason why in general the melting point of this particular device must be somewhere around 4000 degrees centigrade or maybe even more than that. So that all the astronauts who are sitting in that particular spacecraft will be safe. So at each and every particular state, all the components will just keep on getting separated, and finally at one particular point, they will be splashing down somewhere in Bay of Bengal, particularly the case of your Indian waters. Right, so this is the complete program of that one. And for this particular thing, they have developed one particular device. This is the one that you have seen there. Right, this is the one in which these particular astronauts are going to travel, or else they are going to re-enter into the Earth's space again. That is what you're calling it as a CARE module, the Crew Atmospheric Re-Entry Experiment. This is one particular experiment which has been recently tested by ISRO. At the same time, we have got one more thing, that is Space Capsule Recovery Experiment. At the same time, there is one more experiment which has been conducted by ISRO in the recent time, that is Pad Abort Test. Now this is one particular test with the main intention, suppose that launch site lone. So launch site and here you are talking about this particular place lone engine start avagane edana technical issue anedi start ayinappudu, then in that particular case safe exit avadam kosam you're talking about the case of your pad abort test. గతంలో ఇలాంటివి జరిగాయి అంటే ఇండియాలో కాదు. ఫర్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్ యూ టాక్ అబౌట్ ద కేస్ ఆఫ్ ఇరాక్. It's not Iraq, it is Iran. So around 2 years back, they have tried to launch their own satellites. Now for that particular thing, they have tested 3 launch vehicles. So first launch vehicle used చేసినప్పుడు an experimental satellite was launched successfully. Experimental satellite by Iran was launched successfully. So the experimental satellite అనేది successfully launch అయింది కాబట్టి then they tried to launch the real satellites which had more amount of lifetime, which had more amount of applications. Second attempt lo that particular launch vehicle blasted on the site itself. అదే particular launch pad లోనే అక్కడ it had blasted. Then again they developed one more satellite. Even that particular thing also launch site lone, launch pad lone akkade adi blast అయిపోయింది. మరి such incidences ఈ మధ్య కాలంలో ఏమైనా జరిగాయా? Any such incidences wherein the launch vehicle just take off and వెంటనే blast అయిపోయింది? SpaceX company వాళ్ళది, right? So one particular experiment by the case of Elon Musk, in the recent times it had failed. సో అటువంటి ఇన్సిడెంట్స్ జరిగినప్పుడు దెన్ ఇన్ దట్ పర్టికులర్ కేస్ సో ద క్రూ హూఎవర్ ఈస్ దేర్ ఇన్ దట్ పర్టికులర్ డివైస్ సో దట్ వాళ్ళందరూ కూడా సేఫ్గా ఎస్కేప్ అవ్వాలి. సో ఫర్ దాట్ పర్టికులర్ థింగ్ that particular pad abort test is being conducted అని అంటాం. So in case of your Gaganyaan, this is one particular prestigious project which has been taken up by ISRO అని అంటాం. Gaganyaan mission. The first human space flight program. The first human space flight program by ISRO. The first human space flight program by ISRO. Then, right. LVM-3 will be used for Gaganyaan mission. Launch vehicle Mark 3 will be used. Launch vehicle Mark 3 will be used. Launch vehicle Mark 3 will be used for Gaganyaan mission. For Gaganyaan mission, ISRO has signed an MOU. For Gaganyaan mission, ISRO has signed an MOU with Roscosmos regarding the selection training and medical examination of the astronauts. Regarding selection, training and medical examination of the astronauts. Next, for Gaganyaan mission, ISRO has signed another MOU with CNES, France Space Agency, regarding the space medicine, and the space radiation suit. SUIT. So as long as they are going to remain in the space, they need to have some dress which can protect them from all sorts of cosmic radiation. At the same time, in the case of a gamma radiation. So for that particular thing, they need to have a special thing. At the same time, for Gaganyaan mission, ISRO has developed Vyom-Mitra. A female spacefaring humanoid robot. To mimic the crew activities. Of Gaganyaan. So when are they going to launch this Gaganyaan? 2024, but the latest announcement says that October first week or second week this particular year. So they are going to have the first phase of the Gaganyaan. I'm not talking about the complete Gaganyaan project. So the first phase will be carried out in the first week or else the second week of October and Yanta. Then space capsule recovery experiment. SCRE, Space Capsule Recovery Experiment, was conducted by ISRO, was conducted by ISRO was conducted by ISRO as a part of the Gaganyaan mission. As a part of Gaganyaan mission. Pad abort test. Pad abort test, which is a test of launch escape system, which is a test of launch escape system, which is a test of launch escape system of the crew in the Gaganyaan, of the crew in the Gaganyaan has been recently tested, has been recently tested. Next one. Crew atmospheric re-entry experiment. Crew atmospheric re-entry experiment will be used as a testing platform, will be used as a testing platform for all the re-entry technologies, for all the re-entry technologies related to Gaganyaan, for all the re-entry technologies related to Gaganyaan. Next, ISRO has signed an agreement with IIT Madras, to build training modules, for Gaganyaan program, Next, ISRO has signed MOU with Indian Navy. ISRO has signed an MOU with Indian Navy to bring the crew safely, after splashing down in Bay of Bengal. After splashing down in Bay of Bengal. After splashing down in Bay of Bengal. Next, ISRO has signed MOU with Australia. ISRO has signed MOU with Australia for setting up mobile unit for direct to ground communication, at Cocos Islands. Direct to ground communication at Cocos Islands. Right. Now, even in case of your Mangalyaan, even in case of Mangalyaan 2 also, the first signals were received by Deep Space Communication Network Australia. Now, with an expectation again you are talking about here. So Chandrayaan 1, a successful one. At the same time we talk about the case of your Mangalyaan, a successful one. So in case of Chandrayaan 1, the first signals from Chandrayaan 1, they were received by Deep Space Communication Network, which is in Bengaluru. But whereas in case of Mangalyaan, the first signals were received by the Deep Space Communication Network, which is in Australia. So here we have signed one more agreement with Australia regarding the communication mobile unit, which will be set up at Cocos Islands for Gaganyaan project. Right. So this is about the case of the Gaganyaan project. Right. Then you talk about the case of one more project. Of course, this is already an accomplished one. Gagan. Gagan is different, Gaganyaan is different. Right. The moment talking about the case of Gagan, GPS aided geo augmented geo-augmented navigation. GPS-aided geo-augmented navigation. Right. So here, the moment talking about the case of your Gagan project. Now this is one particular project which is being developed by ISRO and Airport Authority of India. Gagan project is being developed by ISRO as well as Airport Authority of India. Now the main objective of this particular Gagan project is to provide better navigation. The objective of this particular program is to provide better navigation for the pilots of Indian Air Force, to provide better navigation for the pilots of Indian Air Force, and also the pilots in the Indian airspace. The pilots in Indian airspace are using the words very clearly. So to provide better navigation facility, for IAF, nothing but Indian Air Force, at the same time to provide better navigation for the pilots of Indian airspace, the pilots whoever is using the Indian airspace. Now that may be the case of your Jet Airways, that may be the case of your Kingfisher, of course that's a past one. Right, whether you're talking about the case of your Tata Airlines, or as the case of your Jet Airways, or as the case of Indigo, or else that may be the case of even the case of your Lufthansa, or else any particular thing. So whichever flight is in the Indian airspace, in order to provide them the better navigation, especially during the rainy season, especially whenever it is thundering, or else whenever it is having a heavy rainfall. So during, at the same time, the case of your fog and mist, మంచు కురుస్తున్న టైంలో కావచ్చు, వర్షం కురుస్తున్న టైంలో కావచ్చు, థండర్స్టార్మ్ కావచ్చు. సో ఈ పర్టికులర్ సీజన్లో, ఈ పర్టికులర్ టైంలో టు ప్రొవైడ్ ద బెటర్ నావిగేషన్ టు ఆల్ ద పైలట్స్ హూ ఆర్ యూటిలైజింగ్ ద ఇండియన్ ఎయిర్ స్పేస్ అట్ ద సేమ్ టైమ్ for Indian Air Force. So this is one particular navigation facility. So navigation facility which is considered to be a better one, augmented in the sense GPS kanna you talking about a better one. So earlier also we use this word ASLV, augmented satellite launch vehicle, a launch vehicle which is a better version when compared to the earlier version. The similar thing here. Right, you are talking about a navigation facility which is even better when compared to the GPS. And this particular thing is being designed and developed by ISRO along with the case of your Indian Airport or as the Airport Authority of India, especially for the case of Indian Air Force or else any particular pilot who is using the Indian airspace. So Indian airspace is totally restricted. Now if you want, I don't know how many of you know this, India means only, as on today's date, if you want, you can even block any particular aeroplane. An aeroplane which is belonging to the case of your Pakistan or as the case of your Bangladesh, the moment you announce it as a no-fly zone, they cannot fly from India. Suppose that if you have got a particular flight which is scheduled from Karachi to Dhaka, from Pakistan to Bangladesh, then in that particular case, the moment you are blocking the airspace, it means that the flight which is scheduled from Pakistan to Bangladesh, they have to go all the way across the Arabian Sea. Nothing but from this particular point, they have to reach till Sri Lanka and then they have to enter. Which means they cannot enter into the Indian subcontinent. So they will fly all the way from here, Arabian Sea covers Sri Lanka. If at all Sri Lanka is allowing them, then in that particular case they use the Sri Lankan airspace and then they will enter into Bangladesh. That is when you are blocking them. So this particular, for this thing we have got many number of rules and regulations. In case of war-like situation, we can block the airspace totally. But as on today's date, there is no such restriction as on today's date. Right. Now that is about the case of Gagan project and Yantam. At the same time about this, you have got one more project which is related to Gagan. Yes, Gemini. Right. So the full form of Gemini, Gagan enabled Mariner's instrument. Gagan enabled Mariner's instrument for navigation and information. Gagan enabled Mariner's instrument for navigation and information. Now the moment you talk about the case of the fisherman, now I hope you know about this. In one number of times dialogues we know untam. Now these particular fishermen, once they go into the sea, they will be in the sea for a period of 7 days or 10 days or just 12 days or almost like a varam badrul pad akade untar. They stay in the sea itself. Now the question is that once they enter into any particular sea, that may be the case of your Bay of Bengal or Arabian Sea, then in that particular case, we cannot communicate with those particular persons. The reason for that one is very simple. వాళ్ళు ఉన్న ప్లేస్లో మొబైల్ నెట్వర్క్ అనేది ఖచ్చితంగా ఉండదు. మరి ఈ పర్టికులర్ 1 week or 10 days లో ఫర్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్ సపోజ్ దట్ ఏ లో ప్రెషర్ రీజన్ బిల్డ్స్ అప్, a cyclone builds up, then in that particular case, how to alert them? Hindama? Right. So as on today's date, we have got a developed mechanism for that one. Now for example, suppose that in your mobile, you don't have any particular signal. Mobile signal ledo. Then is there any possibility that you can speak to anyone in the world? I'm saying anyone. You can reach 108. You can reach, or else in simple terms, you can reach the emergency numbers you can reach. You're able to speak to someone or the other. Right? You're able to convey your problem. So whatever is the problem, you're able to convey, but you're able to speak. And it means that even though your mobile is not having any particular network to speak to your known persons or relatives or friends, but you have got some possibility that you are in a position to speak to someone or the other. Now on a similar way, now these particular persons, you're talking in the case of fishermen, సముద్రంలో కొన్ని కిలోమీటర్ల దూరంలో ఉన్నారు, వాళ్ళు ఉన్న ప్లేస్లో యూ డోంట్ హ్యావ్ మొబైల్ నెట్వర్క్ లేదు. దెన్ ఇన్ దాట్ పర్టికులర్ కేస్ వాళ్ళకి ఇన్ఫర్మేషన్ ఎలా పంపించాలి? సో ఇన్ దాట్ పర్టికులర్ కేస్ వాళ్ళు యూజ్ చేస్తున్న మొబైల్లో ఒక అప్లికేషన్ ఇన్స్టాల్ చేసుకుంటే, సో దాట్ పర్టికులర్ అప్లికేషన్ విల్ రిసీవ్ the messages or as the information even though the mobile is not having any amount of or else any type of network unna network lekunna mobile lo install chesina oka application that will help them to come back to the shore, or else that will tell them, that will guide them to move in which particular direction, and at the same time in which particular direction the cyclone or else a low pressure region is approaching or else it has formed. So in order to provide information for these particular fishermen, so this particular system is being developed, which are calling it as Gagan enabled mariners instrument for navigation and information. And this particular thing has been developed by ISRO. It is being developed by ISRO and INCOIS. It is being developed by ISRO and INCOIS. So what is INCOIS? Indian National Center for Oceanic Information Systems. Indian National Center for Oceanic Information Systems. Maybe you might have discussed about this in case of geography lo discuss chesuntaru, or as a case of disaster lo discuss chesuntaru kachithanga. INCOIS, Indian National Center for Oceanic Information Systems. So this particular thing, application which are calling it as Gemini, it is being developed by ISRO and Indian National Center for Oceanic Information System, which is working under the Ministry of Earth Sciences, which is working under the Ministry of Earth Sciences, which is working under the Ministry of Earth Sciences. So basically INCOIS అనేది సునామీ వార్నింగ్ సిస్టమ్, అది సునామీ హెచ్చరిక వ్యవస్థ అని అంటాం. A particular system, a particular center which has been set up for warning tsunamis, a tsunami warning system అని అంటాం. A tsunami warning system. INCOIS basically it is a tsunami warning system. Alright, this is about the case of Gagan as well as the case of Gemini. Then one more upcoming project by ISRO, NISAR. It is an upcoming project by ISRO. It's an upcoming project. NASA. So full form of this one, NASA ISRO Synthetic Aperture Radar. NASA ISRO Synthetic Aperture Radar. NASA ISRO Synthetic Aperture Radar. It is a joint project by NASA and ISRO. A joint project by NASA and ISRO. And this particular project has got some speciality. The speciality is that it is the very first of its kind. ఇంతవరకు ఇటువంటి పర్టికులర్ శాటిలైట్ని ఎవరు కూడా లాంచ్ చేయలేదు. ఇట్ ఈస్ ద ఫస్ట్ ఆఫ్ ఇట్స్ కైండ్, వేరిన్ the two different bands are used at a time. The moment talking about the case of your NISAR, so NISAR is being developed by NASA as well as the case of ISRO. So for this particular NISAR, NASA is developing one particular radar system which is based on L-band frequency, and for this particular one ISRO is developing one particular radar which is based on S-band frequency. So it's nothing but the case of your dual band ani antam. You're talking about the case of a dual band. One is a case of L-band and the other one is a case of your S-band. At the same time, for this particular NISAR project, apart from the case of your L-band radar, ISRO is also developing, ISRO has already developed, you can say that one. సో వాళ్ళు డెవలప్ చేశారు. అలాగే నిసార్ కొరకు వాళ్ళు కాంట్రిబ్యూట్ చేయాల్సినవి ఏవైతే ఉన్నాయో, డెవలప్ చేయాల్సినవి ఏవైతే ఉన్నాయో, ఆల్రెడీ దోస్ పర్టికులర్ థింగ్స్ దే హ్యావ్ రీచ్డ్ ద ఇస్రో సెంటర్స్ ఇన్ ఇండియా. అంటే యాజ్ ఆన్ టుడేస్ డేట్ ద వర్క్ ఆఫ్ నాసా ఈజ్ కంప్లీట్. మరి నాసా రెస్పాన్సిబిలిటీ ఏంటి అని అన్నప్పుడు, యాజ్ అ పార్ట్ ఆఫ్ దిస్ పర్టికులర్ నిసార్ ప్రాజెక్ట్, రైట్? So the work or the responsibility of NASA is to develop one particular L-band radar. So in case of this one, the responsible that one is the case of your L-band radar. That is one particular thing. At the same time, the GPS antennas, and high capacity data storage. High capacity data storage, GPS antennas, high capacity data storage, at the same time L-band radar. These things will be developed by NASA. Then what about ISRO? For this particular thing, ISRO is contributing. ISRO is developing S-band radar. ISRO is developing S-band radar. Along with this, the launch vehicle, that is LVM-3, launch vehicle Mark 3. Now the question is that what is the objective of NISAR? Now for example, Gagan ani anna. Gagan deen kuda develop chesam to provide navigation to the Indian Air Force as well as the pilots who are using the Indian airspace. అలాగే the moment talking about the case of your Gemini అని అన్నప్పుడు, so the main objective of Gemini is to provide information to the fishermen who are in the deep sea. That is the main objective of that. At the same time, the moment you are talking about the case of NISAR, what is the function of this one and what is the objective of this one? And to observe, to monitor, to study, to analyze the earth. Nothing but the case of a ground surface, close ga surface study cheyali. So from what distance ani annappudu, the main objective of this one is to study the surface of earth as close as 1 centimeter. Just imagine the resolution of the cameras that they are using in this one. You are trying to study this one. For example, first nenu cheptanu em rayalandi, right? Assume that this is a case of surface andam, right? This is a case of surface. Now this particular surface, you are trying to read this using some radars, at the same time some GPS antennas. But at what distance from this particular? There in that case, the zooming level, or else you're talking about the receiving power, transmitting power of those particular antennas is very much high, that they are able to study and analyze the things that are happening at a distance of 1 centimeter. అంటే ఏదైనా ఒక ఆబ్జెక్ట్ మనం 1 సెంటీమీటర్ డిస్టెన్స్ లో పెట్టుకుని ఇలా పెట్టుకొని చూస్తే అది ఎంత పెద్దగా అనిపిస్తుందో అంత క్లోజ్ గా that particular thing will be there. So it will be helpful in studying the changes that are taking place on the soil surface. Huge amount of changes, right? It is the first radar of its kind in space. It is the first radar of its kind in space to systematically map Earth. It is the first radar of its kind in space. The first radar of its kind in space to systematically map the Earth. To systematically map the Earth using L-band and S-band frequencies. Using L-band and S-band frequencies to measure the changes in planet's surface, to measure the changes in planet's surface at a distance of less than 1 centimeter. At a distance of less than 1 centimeter. It is a 2800 kilogram satellite. It is a 2800 kilogram satellite consisting of L band and S band radars, which makes it a dual frequency, radar imaging satellite. Right, so this is another future project which will be taken up by ISRO. Then the next one, Netra project, again another upcoming project by ISRO. Netra. Network for, this full form of this one, Network for Space Object Tracking and Analysis. Network for Space Object Tracking and Analysis. Now what is this particular project Netra? Now this particular project Netra is being developed keeping in view the future space wars. Now you're talking about one particular term which is known as space war. And any particular war which may take place in the near future at zero gravity. So the moment talking about a case of space and you know space ఎక్కడి నుండి స్టార్ట్ అవుతుంది లేదా ఏ ప్రాంతాన్ని మనం స్పేస్ అని అంటాం? కర్మాన్ లైన్ తర్వాత ఉన్న రీజన్ అంటే 100 కిలోమీటర్స్ తర్వాత ఉన్న రీజన్ ఏదైతే ఉందో దట్ ఈస్ నోన్ యాజ్ ద కేస్ ఆఫ్ యువర్ స్పేస్ అని. అంటే ఆ పర్టికులర్ రీజన్లో భవిష్యత్తులో యుద్ధాలు జరిగే ఛాన్సెస్ చాలా చాలా ఎక్కువగా ఉన్నాయి. అండ్ అట్ ద సేమ్ టైమ్ యాజ్ ఆన్ టుడేస్ డేట్ we need to protect our own satellites, whether they are present in the LEO orbit or as a case of MEO or as a case of a GEO orbit. మన satellites ను మనం ప్రొటెక్ట్ చేసుకోవాలి. సో వేటి నుండి ప్రొటెక్ట్ చేసుకోవాలి? ఫస్ట్ అండ్ ఫార్మోస్ట్ థింగ్ స్పేస్ డెబ్రిస్ నుండి ప్రొటెక్ట్ చేసుకోవాలి. అట్ ద సేమ్ టైమ్ ఆస్ట్రాయిడ్స్ నుండి, మెటియార్స్ నుండి ప్రొటెక్ట్ చేసుకోవాలి. ఒకవేళ ఆస్ట్రాయిడ్స్ మెటియార్స్ వచ్చి మన శాటిలైట్ని హిట్ చేసినప్పుడు ఆ పర్టికులర్ కేసులో వీ కెనాట్ క్లెయిమ్ ఎనీథింగ్. ఎవరు కూడా కాంపెన్సేషన్ భరించరు, ఎవరు కాంపెన్సేషన్ ఇవ్వరు. బట్ అట్ ద సేమ్ టైమ్ సపోజ్ దట్ ఇఫ్ ఎట్ ఆల్ an Indian satellite is going and hitting an American satellite or else a Chinese satellite, then in that particular case we have to compensate for the loss. That is as per the case of international space agreements ki sambandhinchi, that is one particular agreement. అంటే ఒక స్పేస్ ఆబ్జెక్ట్ని మనం డిస్ట్రాయ్ చేసినప్పుడు లేదా మన శాటిలైట్ that may be accidental, that may be the case of intentionally. సో కావాల్సుకొని లేదా యాక్సిడెంట్గా మన శాటిలైట్ ఇతర దేశాల శాటిలైట్ని డిస్ట్రాయ్ చేస్తే దెన్ ఇన్ దాట్ పర్టికులర్ కేస్ వీ హ్యావ్ టు కాంపెన్సేట్ ఫర్ ద లాస్ ఆఫ్ దట్ పర్టికులర్ శాటిలైట్. బట్ వేర్ ఇన్ సపోజ్ దట్ ఇఫ్ ఎట్ ఆల్ an asteroid is coming and hitting it, a meteor is coming and hitting it, can we claim? Obviously no, we cannot claim for that one. So in order to protect our particular satellites which are operational, which are working, right, so for that particular thing, this is an upcoming project which you are calling it as the Network for Space Object Tracking and Analysis ani anta. Now what is this particular project ani annappudu how it will work? So this is one particular thing wherein you are trying to monitor all the satellites which are operational, all the satellites which are launched by India. మనం లాంచ్ చేసిన ప్రతి ఒక్క శాటిలైట్ So you are trying to monitor. For example, you have got one particular satellite in the LEO orbit here. So at a height of, assume that it is at a height of around 600 kilometers. At the same time, you have got another satellite which is at a height of 750 kilometers. You have got another satellite in the SSO orbit which is at a height of around 600 kilometers. So వీటన్నిటిని monitor చేయడానికి this particular project Netra will be working. At the same time, this particular project Netra, so it is what it is trying to do. So it is monitoring each and every particular satellite. At the same time, whatever is the data that is being collected by this particular satellite or as this particular satellite or as this particular satellite, so even Netra will also receive the complete information from all these particular things, and at the same time the information that is collected by Netra will be transmitted to NRSA. Nothing but the case of National Remote Sensing Agency. సో ఇప్పుడున్న సిస్టమ్ ఏంటి, ఇప్పుడున్న వ్యవస్థ ఏంటి అని అన్నప్పుడు ఒక్కొక్క శాటిలైట్ నుండి NRSA is receiving the information individually. You're talking about RISAT 2B R1 అని అంటాం, that is one particular thing. At the same time, we have got even one more satellite which was launched using PSLV C46. You call that one as RISAT 2B అని అంటాం. Radar Imaging Satellite 2B was launched using PSLV C46. మళ్ళీ RISAT 2B R1 వీటి ఫంక్షన్స్ ఏంటి అన్నప్పుడు ఆల్రెడీ యూ హ్యావ్ రిటన్ 2B R1 రాసారు. Now what is 2B R1 used for? Forestry, disaster management, flood relief. For that particular basic things you are using 2B R1. But the moment talking about the case of your RISAT 2B radar imaging satellite is used for monitoring the Indo-Bangladesh borders, the Indo-Myanmar borders, to stop the infiltration, to stop these particular Rohingyas entering into India illegally. RISAT 2B will work. So the information that is collected by RISAT 2B, the information collected by RISAT 2B R1, the information collected by EOS 01, or as the case of a 04, or as the case of a 06. So all that particular information will be gathered by Netra, and that particular information will be transmitted to NRSA, or as the case of your regional remote sensing centers, which are located at 5 different places across the nation. That may be the case of Bangalore, or is the case of your Jodhpur, or is the case of your Kolkata, or New Delhi, or is the other one that is in the case of your Pune. So different places we have got this particular regional remote sensing centers. So first and foremost thing, Netra will monitor each and every particular satellite. At the same time, the power of this particular Netra, or the ability of this particular Netra, is that it can monitor any particular space debris which is or as small as any particular space debris which is as small as 10 centimeters. Suppose that even this object in space, so space lo e size object, suppose that if it is moving towards a satellite which is operational, then in that particular case then identify చేయగలుగుతుంది. I'm talking about an object which is of 10 centimeters, right? Netra, here in case of a Netra, so we have got some radars, high power radars are present in that one. At the same time, we're talking about the case of the antennas, at the same time the data storage units. So Netra is provided by all these particular things, which has the ability to identify and locate any object which is as small as 10 centimeters and as far as 3000 kilometers. Suppose that if any object is approaching our satellite from a distance of 3000 kilometers, వాటిని కూడా ఐడెంటిఫై చేయడం, లొకేట్ చేయడం, that is possible because of this one. That is what you're calling it as Project Netra. కంటిన్యూ చేయాలా, ఆపేయాలా? సగం మంది పడుకున్నారు క్లాస్లో. సింపుల్ as that. ఎప్పుడెప్పుడు వదిలిపెడితే రూమ్కి వెళ్ళి ఎప్పుడెప్పుడు పడుకుందాం అన్నట్టుగా ఉన్నారు. అసలు మీ పక్కన ఉన్న వాళ్ళు కనీసం కదులుతున్నారో ఒకసారి అబ్జర్వ్ చేశారు? అసలు అబ్జర్వ్ చేయడానికి మీరు ఈ లోకంలో ఉంటాయి కదా, రైట్? మీరే మరో ప్రపంచంలో ఉంటే ఆ మరో ప్రపంచంలో నుంచి మరో ప్రపంచంలో ఉన్న వ్యక్తి కనిపించాడు కదా. ఏంటి? షల్ ఐ కంటిన్యూ ఆర్ షల్ ఐ స్టాప్? బ్రేక్ మాత్రం లేదు. I'll stop the class. If at all I continue, I'll stop the class exactly till 4 o'clock, exactly at 4 o'clock. లేదా ఇప్పుడు ఆపేయమంటే ఇప్పుడే ఆపేస్తాను. And almost around 80% in the class are sleeping. Almost around 80%. Right? The choice is yours, man. Right. It is an early warning system in space. Guys, మీరు పడుకుంటే చెప్పండి. I'm known for scissoring the things. Standing here almost for 15 years or 20 years, I have mastered the art of scissoring. కట్ చేయడం నాకు చాలా ఈజీగా వచ్చు. ఇక్కడే నాకే కాదు, ఇక్కడ నిలబడిన ప్రతి ఒక్కరికి కూడా టాపిక్ ఈజీగా వచ్చు, రైట్? సరే, మిమ్మల్ని తీసుకురావడానికి I'll just give an example here. Few days back, I was in Tirupati for a class. Few days back, I can say few months back again. Alright, so the moment I started teaching physics there, the students of the class said that, sir, మాకు notes ఏం అవసరం లేదు, మీరు చెప్పుకుంటూ వెళ్ళిపోండి అన్నారు. I simply asked them, are you serious? Yes sir, మాకు మెటీరియల్ ఇచ్చారు, everything is good. ఓకే ఫైన్. నాకున్న హ్యాబిట్ ఏంటంటే క్లాస్కి వెళ్ళే ముందు ఒకవేళ వాళ్ళకి మెటీరియల్స్ ఏమైనా ఇస్తే అది చూసి వెళ్ళడం నాకు ఒక ఉన్న అలవాటు. క్లాస్కి వెళ్ళే ముందు నోట్స్ చూసే ఒకసారి, అంటే ప్రింటెడ్ మెటీరియల్. ఐ టుక్ ఇట్ ఫర్ గ్రాంటెడ్. ఆ బుక్లో నుంచి నాట్ ఈవెన్ సింగిల్ క్వశ్చన్ కూడా రాదు. అది గ్రూప్ 4 ఎగ్జామ్ కైనా కూడా ఆ బుక్లో నుంచి సింగిల్ ఎగ్జామ్, గ్రూప్ 2 కాదు, రైట్? ఖచ్చితంగా ఒక క్వశ్చన్ కూడా రాదు. ఐఎమ్ pretty sure about that. దెన్ కాన్ఫిడెంట్గా అడిగాను, ఆర్ యూ సీరియస్ అంటే దే సెడ్ yes sir. సరే అనేసి ఐ స్టార్టెడ్ ద ఫిజిక్స్ క్లాస్ అరౌండ్ ఆఫ్టర్ 1 hour క్లాస్ తర్వాత అప్పుడు చెప్పాను నాకు ఈ విషయం. సరే అని 9 o'clock క్లాస్ స్టార్ట్ చేసి 10 o'clockకి దిస్ పాయింట్ రైజ్డ్. సో 10 o'clockకి స్టార్ట్ చేస్తే బై 4 o'clock ఇన్ ది ఈవినింగ్ ఫిజిక్స్లో మెకానిక్స్ అయిపోయింది, సౌండ్ అయిపోయింది, లైట్ అయిపోయింది, ఎలక్ట్రిసిటీ అయిపోయింది, రైట్? హీట్ చెప్తున్నాను, హీట్ లాస్ట్లో ఉంటే అప్పుడు ఇలా ముందు కూర్చున్న లేడీస్ అంతా సార్ ఏంటమ్మా తప్పు చెప్పానా ఏమన్నా? లేదు సార్, మీరు చెప్పేవి మా పుస్తకంలో లేవు అన్నారు. మీరు చెప్పేవి మా పుస్తకంలో లేవు, మా పుస్తకంలో పైనే ఉన్నాయి, మళ్ళీ మీరు చెప్పేవి నా పుస్తకంలో లేవు అంటే ఇంకొక గంట ఓపిక పట్టండి, హీట్ అయిపోయినకి వచ్చింది, మ్యాగ్నెటిజం ఒకటి ఉంది, అది చెప్పేసి వెళ్ళిపోతాను అన్నాను. రైట్, ఎగ్జాక్ట్లీ at 5 o'clock I stopped the class. నెక్స్ట్ డే క్లాస్ ఉంటే క్యాన్సిల్ చేసేసి 5:30కి I took the train all the way from Tirupati and back to Hyderabad. మళ్ళీ మీకు అలా చెప్పండి, రేపు ఈవినింగ్ ఈ టైం వరకు మై పార్ట్ విల్ బి డన్. 80% of the class is sleeping. Right? Chalo. Project Netra. It is an early warning system in space. It is an early warning system in space to detect space debris, and other hazards to the Indian satellites. Under this project, ISRO plans, అందుకే ఫ్యూచర్ ప్రాజెక్ట్ అని అన్నాను, ఇట్స్ నాట్ a practical thing. ISRO plans to place many connected radars, telescopes, data processing center, data processing center, and a control center. And a control center. Next, Netra can spot, track, Netra can spot, track any object which is as small as 10 centimeters, or which is as small as 10 centimeters, and which is as far as 3000 kilometers, which is as small as 10 centimeters and as far as 3000 kilometers. Right. Then the next one, in space. Netra? So generally, any particular space debris, to the possible extent they enter into the Earth space, they are totally burnt out. Mesosphere lone, even today, mesosphere lone, there are many number of meteors and asteroids which are totally burnt out because of huge amount of friction. So they remain unburnt if the size of those particular asteroids is too huge. సైజ్ పెద్దగా ఉంటే కంప్లీట్గా బర్న్ అవుట్ కాక కాలిపోకుండా స్మాల్ సైజ్ ఆస్ట్రాయిడ్స్ ఏవైతే ఇప్పటికీ కూడా భూమి మీద పడుతున్నాయి చాలా ఉన్నాయి. At the same time, these particular asteroids, they are considered to be huge source of the mineral deposits. As on today's date, many number of persons are conducting various types of research on that one. But the thing is that the amount of radiation in it is negligible when compared to the case of the gamma rays that we are receiving, or as the case of the cosmic rays that we are receiving. So these particular small sized particles, the amount of radiation which is carried out by them will be very, very less. Right. So you talk about the case of in space. So what is this particular in space? Indian National Space Promotion, Indian National Space Promotion and Authorization Center. Indian National Space Promotion and Authorization Center. Indian National Space Promotion and Authorization Center. So the headquarters of this one is in Gandhinagar, Gujarat. The headquarters of InSpace, this is in Gandhinagar. Now the question is that what is this particular InSpace, what are the roles, what are the functions of InSpace, and number this first thing. Now as of today's date, we talk about the case of ISRO. ISRO is trying to concentrate a lot on space expeditions, space explorations. అంతరిక్షంలో ఏమున్నాయి, అంతరిక్షం యొక్క అధ్యయనము అని అంటాం. So when ISRO is trying to concentrate on these particular space expeditions, the launch of communication satellites, the launch of remote sensing satellites, the launch of navigation satellites, now these particular things are becoming a huge burden on ISRO. A burden in the sense you're talking about the manpower that we are talking about here. At the same time, we're talking about the case of the same technology that has to be implemented. So for that particular thing, as on today's date, what is the thinking, or else what is the objective is, the moment you start encouraging the private companies in space technology, or else case of your space field, then launch vehicles you are designing దగ్గర నుండి, satellites you are designing వరకు, అలాగే వీటికి కావాల్సిన ఫ్యూయల్ని మ్యానుఫ్యాక్చర్ చేయడం కూడా ఒకవేళ మనం ప్రైవేట్ కంపెనీస్కి అప్పచెప్పేస్తే, అంటే ఇండియాలో ఇస్రో వర్క్ ఈస్ రెడ్యూస్ టు సర్టెన్ ఎక్స్టెంట్. అంటే లాంచ్ వెహికల్స్ బర్డెన్ తగ్గిపోయింది. అట్ ద సేమ్ టైం టాకింగ్ ద కేస్ ఆఫ్ యువర్ శాటిలైట్స్, వీటి యొక్క బర్డెన్ అనేది ఇస్రో మీద నుండి తగ్గింది. And who is working on that? The private companies are working on that one under the guidance of ISRO. They are not given totally free hand. So this is one particular thing which is going to act as a mediator between the government, nothing but the case of your ISRO, as well as the case of your the different private space agencies. The technology will be transferred. The technology will be transferred from ISRO to these particular private space agencies with the help of, or it's through this particular mediator which are calling it as in-space Aniantam. The main objective in the ISRO want to concentrate on the space expeditions, or as a case of your space explorations పైన దృష్టి పెట్టాలి అంటే చిన్న చిన్న పనులు ఏవైతే ఉన్నాయో ఇవి ప్రైవేట్ కంపెనీస్కి అప్పచెప్పాలి. మరి ద మూమెంట్ టాకింగ్ అబౌట్ ద కేస్ ఆఫ్ your ప్రైవేట్ కంపెనీస్, మరి ఇండియాలో స్పేస్ టెక్నాలజీలో ప్రైవేట్ కంపెనీస్ ఉన్నాయా లేవా? సో ఇప్పుడు నిదానంగా యాజ్ ఆన్ టుడేస్ డేట్ ద స్పేస్ కంపెనీస్ ఆర్ డెవలపింగ్ ఇన్ ఇండియా. నౌ యూ టాక్ అబౌట్ ద కేస్ ఆఫ్ your Skyroot Aerospace Limited. Skyroot Aerospace Limited. At the same time you talk about the case of your Agnikul Cosmos. At the same time you talk about the case of N Space Tech Private Limited. So we have got many number of space tech companies or the space related companies which are operational in India as on today's date. We have got one particular thing which are calling it as the Space Kids Private Limited. Space Kids Private Limited. So the space activities will be encouraged by the government of India. So with respect to the case of your private companies. Now that is the reason why the moment talking about the case of SSLV and Yannapdu, SSLV designing and manufacturing is carried out by NSIL with the help of private companies. PSLV manufacturing is carried out by station in India, Agnikul Cosmos. At the same time, the first Indian private rocket launch vehicle, Vikram S. I hope you might have heard about it. Vikram S. At the same time, the first private cryogenic engine of India. So that is Dhawan 1. Satish Dhawan. Dhawan 1. Now that particular Dhawan 1, a cryogenic engine, was developed by Skyroot Aerospace Limited. Again a private one. You're talking about Agniban. It's again a launch vehicle which is being developed by the Agni-led company. So Agnikul Cosmos. So all these are nothing but the case of the private initiatives, the private developments in the field of space science, space technology, as well as the case of your space exploration. Main objective, ISRO's burden on the case of your launch vehicles and the case of your satellites has to be reduced, and private companies must be encouraged so that ISRO can concentrate on interstellar operations, space exploration, something like the case of your Chandrayaan 3, something like the case of your Chandrayaan 4, wherein you are trying to bring samples back to the ground. At the same time, you are talking about the case of your mission Aditya, wherein we are trying to focus on the sun. At the same time, we're talking about the case of your mission Venus. Now the other day even the Prime Minister was talking about these two things, mission Aditya as well as the case of mission Venus. Now why we are focusing on Venus? What is the reason for that one? Does Venus planet have any particular speciality? Far to Earth or close to Earth? It is close to Earth. At the same time, the moment talking about the case of your Venus, it is the hottest planet. Mercury is not the hottest planet because Mercury is not having any atmosphere. Mercury is not having any atmosphere. That is the reason why Mercury is not the hottest planet, but wherein Venus is the hottest planet because it is having some amount of atmosphere on that one. Right? At the same time, Venus, you give different names for that one. You call it as a morning star, you call it as a evening star. At the same time, Mars planet, you are calling it as the case of your red planet. So in order to carry out these particular explorations, ISRO needs manpower. At the same time, ISRO, it needs some amount of time. Now that is the reason why InSpace has been formulated. At the same time, the moment talking about the case of InSpace is having even one more thing. So if required, InSpace can act as a mediator between the Indian private companies and the foreign space agencies. So you're talking as a mediator between, InSpace is going to act as a mediator not only between ISRO and Indian space companies, but also between the other space agencies like NASA, Roscosmos, the European Space Agency, or in the case of your JAXA, or in the case of Canadian Space Agency, could be any particular space agency in the world. As on today's date, even the even the case of your United Arab Emirates Space Agency, even that particular space agency is also doing some wonders. So very soon UAE is also planning to send some astronauts into the space, and that too the women astronauts. United Arab Emirates is planning to send women astronauts into space. Now that is their particular future space programs. At the same time, UAE is the first Gulf country which has placed its particular satellite in the orbit of Mars. We have got one particular mission which is known as the Hope mission. So this particular agency, which you are calling it as InSpace, it is going to act as a mediator between ISRO and the space agencies, or as the other space agencies of the world, and then the ISRO, or the private space companies. InSpace will play, or InSpace will provide a level playing field InSpace will provide a level playing field for private companies to use the Indian space infrastructure. It will act as a interface between ISRO. It will act as an interface between ISRO and everyone who wants to participate in space related activities. Right. To let ISRO concentrate on space exploration, research and development, and strengthening the use of space, InSpace will provide the necessary support with the help of private companies. So that is about the case of Indian Space Association. Sorry, Indian National Space Promotion and Authorization Center. Then you talk about the case of Defense Research Space Agency. Defense Research Space Agency. DRSA. Defense Research Space Agency. Right, so what is this particular Defense Research Space Agency? Now this is one particular agency which will provide the research and development to, which will provide R&D to Defense Space Agency. Now did we discuss about DSA in the past? Defense Space Agency discuss చేసామో చేయలేదా? The moment you're talking about the case of your Defense Space Agency, the Chief of the Defense Staff is a member of this particular space agency. Now what is the main role, or else what is the main function of Defense Space Agency in Yannapro? Right, to prepare India, to strengthen India for any sort of future space wars. భవిష్యత్తులో జరగబోయే అంతరిక్షంలో జరగబోయే యుద్ధాలు ఏవైతే ఉన్నాయో, సో వీటి కొరకు ఇండియాను రెడీ చేయాలి. So how? You need to develop the different technologies there, different types of weapons, right, which can be operated even at a distance of 100 kilometers from the ground, or else even more than that. Now for all these particular things we need to carry out some research and development programs, R&D. So our research and development cheyadaniki this particular DRSA has been sanctioned, or at the same time has been approved by DRSA has been approved by the Central Cabinet, or else the Union Cabinet, in the recent times. DRSA, Defense Research Space Agency, has been approved by the Central Cabinet in the recent times. The objective of DRSA, the objective of DRSA is to provide R&D support, is to provide R&D support to Defense Space Agency, to Defense Space Agency, to Defense Space Agency, which will strengthen India, which will strengthen India in terms of, which will strengthen India in terms of the future space wars, which will strengthen India in terms of future space wars. భవిష్యత్తులో జరగబోయే యుద్ధాలు, that is one thing. Then you talk about the case of liquid mirror telescope. Liquid mirror telescope. Now what is the use of telescope? Telescope దేనికోసం యూజ్ చేస్తాం? To spot, to identify, to watch any particular object which is at a certain distance. So here you're talking about the case of the liquid mirror telescope. Basically it is used for astronomy. This is the first ever telescope which is being developed particularly for astronomical purpose. అంతరిక్ష రంగంలో పరిశోధనల కొరకు కావచ్చు, లేదా అంతరిక్షంలో ఉన్న వాటిని కంటిన్యూస్గా మానిటర్ చేయడానికి, కంటిన్యూస్గా స్టడీ చేయడానికి the first ever telescope which has been designed and developed in India with the help of some other countries. The countries like Poland, the countries like Belgium. These particular countries, they have supported, they have helped India in developing this particular liquid mirror telescope. Now the question is that where is this particular liquid mirror telescope? That is the question. Now, before we go into this, now there is some movie race in the recent times. I don't remember the name of that one. So there in that case, Anupam Kher is also there in one Telugu movie. I tell you. Edama. Yes, yes, right. Kartikeya too. Now there in that particular case, at the end of the movie, almost the last part, he'll show he'll show one particular place నుండి పైన స్కైలో ఉన్న స్టార్స్ యొక్క మూవ్మెంట్ చూస్తూ ఉంటాడు. Now whether that particular situation is real or not, or else a fake one, that's a different thing. But there are certain places in the world wherein the place where you stand there, from that particular place, if you watch the sky will be absolutely clear. Now for example, evening time when you go to the terrace of your hostel, and if you look at the sky, you will not be in a position to spot the stars very much clearly. Nakshatralu clearer kanipinchavu because this particular city is completely surrounded by pollution. The smoke and the smoke which is coming from the vehicles, as well as the case of industries. Now suppose that if you go to any particular remote area, if you go to any particular rural area, and in that particular rural area, the moment you look at the sky during the evening time, the sky will be very much clear. So astronomical studies can be conducted only at few places, not in all the places. Particularly not in the city of Hyderabad, or else in the case of the city of Delhi, or as the case of the cities like your Nagpur, or as the case of your Surat, or as the case of your Mumbai, the highly polluted cities. So for astronomical studies, so this particular liquid mirror telescope is being set up in Nainital in Uttarakhand. Nainital in the state of Uttarakhand. Liquid mirror telescope. So the place where it is set up, that is Nainital in Uttarakhand, and the name of the institution is Devasthal Observatory Campus. Devasthal Observatory Campus. A liquid mirror telescope is being set up at Devasthal Observatory Campus. Devasthal Observatory Campus in Nainital, Uttarakhand. It is the first ever telescope that is set up for astronomical purpose. Astronomical purpose. It is developed by India, Belgium, Canada. Developed by India, Belgium, Canada, Poland, and Uzbekistan. Right. Devasthal is one of the world's largest. And original site for astronomical studies. Right. Double asteroid redirection test. Double asteroid redirection test. Very much popularly known as DART test. Heard about this? Of course, conducted by NASA. Now, what is the primary use of this one, or else why did they conduct this particular test and you suppose that in case of your future, a warlike situation arises. So, in order to protect Earth, from aliens, or else the case of any particular asteroids in the near future. So, భూమిని కాపాడుకోవాలి ఎవరి నుండి? Right, now we know this particular aliens, the vehicle in which they travel, or else the moment of the case of any particular huge or big asteroids. So in order to protect Earth from all these particular things, NASA has conducted this particular test, which is known as the double asteroid redirection test, in short, which is known as DART అని అంటాం. The moment you're talking about the case of DART test, what they have done. So the moment you're talking about the case of asteroids, we know that between the Mars planet as well as the case of Jupiter, we have got one particular belt which is known as asteroid belt అని అంటాం. An asteroid belt is there between Mars as well as the case of Jupiter planet. Now in this particular asteroid, or else in this particular asteroid belt, they have selected one particular asteroid. Now assume that this is one particular asteroid which is present between Mars as well as the case of Jupiter. So the name of that particular thing is known as Dimorphos. The name of this particular asteroid is Dimorphos. And the speciality of this particular asteroid is that now this particular asteroid is having one more asteroid which is orbiting around it. So in general, the planets will have the satellites. The planets are having satellites. For example, you talk about the case of your moon, you talk about the case of your Mars, or the case of Jupiter or Uranus, all these particular planets, they have got some objects which are orbiting around them. And what మనం satellites and natural satellites అని అంటాం. Now here in this particular case, even this particular Dimorphos is also having, right, even Dimorphos is also having one particular asteroid, and this particular asteroid is constantly moving around it as if it is the satellite of that one. So the name of this particular asteroid is Didymos. So Didymos is a smaller asteroid. Didymos is a smaller asteroid which is orbiting around a bigger one, which are calling it as Dimorphos. Now what is this particular DART test related to? What they have done is that, so NASA, they have tried to distract this particular smaller one. So in that particular attempt, so an object was sent from NASA which had hit this particular thing which are calling it as the Didymos. So before the collision, before the impact, now this particular object which are calling it as Didymos, it used to orbit around the larger object in a span of around 90 or 92 minutes, earlier one. So before the impact, before the collision, Didymos used to orbit around Dimorphos in a span of something around 92 minutes, 92 or what is the number, right? And then after the impact, now this particular Didymos, it had moved very much closer to the original one, or as the larger, it had moved very much closer to the larger one which are calling it as a Dimorphos. Now it is like this. Now as of now, this particular Dimorphos, it is still orbiting around the bigger one. Didymos is still orbiting around the bigger one. But the thing is that as of now, it is just taking something around 50 plus minutes time. Earlier it used to take 92 minutes. But as of now, since it has moved very much closer to the bigger one which are calling it as a Dimorphos, the orbital period of this one has got strategically come down. So earlier it was something around more than 80 or 90 minutes, and now it is just around 50 odd minutes. So indicating that with the help of this particular DART test, we can change the position, or else we can change the location of any particular thing. At the same time, if required, we can even reduce that particular space debris. We can reduce that particular asteroid, or as a case of the vehicle of this UFOs అని అంటాం. UFOs of these particular aliens into piece and pieces. And that particular test is what is known as the case of the double asteroid redirection test and double asteroid redirection test and right. Is it done? చెప్పాలా రాశారా రైట్ రాశారంటే ఇట్స్ ఓకే ఫైన్ వెరీ గుడ్ not an issue. Then the last one here ఏంటమ్మా రాయలేదా రైట్ DART is a NASA space mission. It is a NASA space mission which aims to test a method of which aims to test a method of which aims to test a method of planetary defense against near earth like objects right. DART targeted Dimorphos DART targeted Didymos which is actually a smaller asteroid when compared to Dimorphos, which is actually a smaller asteroid compared to Dimorphos. Right. After this test, it was found that the orbital period of the smaller asteroid, the orbital period of the smaller asteroid has decreased considerably. Right. James Webb Telescope. Hope you might have heard about this. The James Webb Telescope. So apart from the case of your James Webb Telescope, we had even one more, which was also in news. Hubble Telescope. Now, is there any relation between these two? James Webb Telescope is considered to be the successor of the Hubble Telescope. Right, the moment you're talking about the case of a Hubble Telescope, that using that particular telescope, you can see what is happening deep inside the universe. Which means some lakhs of kilometers from us, what is happening there, you'll be able to study that particular thing. That is using the Hubble Telescope. But wherein the moment you're talking about the case of the James Webb Telescope, now this is one particular telescope which can be traced out to find out the origin of the universe. So basically the moment you talk about the origin of the universe and we have got one particular theory which is known as Big Bang Theory. And but the question is that, is this particular Big Bang Theory accepted by all? Some people doesn't accept Big Bang Theory, some people accept Big Bang Theory, but wherein the other scientists, they do not accept this. So the main objective of this particular James Webb Telescope is that first one to trace out the origin of the universe. So origin of the universe అనేది ఎలా అయ్యింది, how the universe existed, or else how this particular universe formed. That is one particular reason. At the same time, the moment you're talking about the case of your galaxies, now it is said that the galaxies are born regularly. I know you cannot say every day. Galaxies are born regularly. We have got new galaxies. At the same time, there are some particular galaxies which are completely disappearing. You know the case of the stars. Now we know that number of times we చూసే ఉంటారు నక్షత్రాలు రాలిపోతూ ఉంటాయి. చూసారు ఎప్పుడన్నా? మనం చూడవచ్చా చూడకూడదా? రాలిపోయే నక్షత్రాన్ని చూడవచ్చా చూడకూడదా? చూడకూడదు అని కొంతమంది అంటున్నారు, చూడవచ్చు అని కొంతమంది అంటున్నారు. సో అది ఎఫెక్ట్ ఎలా ఉంటుందో తెలియదు, కానీ కొన్ని ప్రాక్టికల్గా డిడ్ యూ ఎవర్ అబ్జర్వ్ దాట్? ఏదైనా నక్షత్రం రాలిపోయేటప్పుడు మీరు ఎప్పుడైనా చూసారా? రైట్, లక్కీ ఆర్ దోస్ పర్సన్స్ who have seen that particular natural phenomena, because it's a natural phenomena. అది జరిగిన తర్వాత కాన్సిక్వెన్స్ ఎలా ఉంటాయి ఆ విషయం పక్కకు పెడితే, ఒక న్యాచురల్గా జరిగిపోయి నక్షత్రాలు రాలిపోవడం అనేది మన కంటికి కనిపించేది చాలా చాలా రేర్గా, చాలా అరుదుగా, వెరీ వెరీ రేర్. ఆ పర్టికులర్ నక్షత్రం రాలిపోవడం మనం నిజంగా చూడగలిగాము అంటే ఇట్ ఈస్ ఏ హ్యూజ్ స్టార్, ఇట్స్ నాట్ ఎ స్మాల్ వన్. ద సింపుల్ రీజన్, ఒకవేళ చిన్న నక్షత్రాలు అనుకోండి, ద మూమెంట్ దే జస్ట్ మూవ్ ఫాలోయింగ్ డౌన్, ఆ పర్టికులర్ టైంలో ఫ్రిక్షన్ మూలంగా దే టోటలీ బర్న్డ్ అవుట్, కాలిపోతాయి. మనకు కనిపిస్తున్నాయి అంటే ఇట్ మీన్స్ దట్ ఇట్స్ అ వెరీ వెరీ బిగ్ వన్, అండ్ దాట్ పర్టికులర్ వన్ యు ఆర్ ఏబుల్ టు సీ బికాస్ ఇట్స్ అ బిగ్ వన్ అండ్ ఇట్ ఈస్ నాట్ బర్న్డ్ అవుట్ కంప్లీట్గా కాలిపోయినప్పుడు ఇంకా దగ్గరికి వచ్చే కొద్దీ దెన్ ఇట్ ఈస్ బర్న్డ్ అవుట్ కంప్లీట్లీ. సో ఇట్ మీన్స్ దట్ యూ హ్యావ్ సీన్ ఎ బిగ్ స్టార్. సో ఆబ్వియస్లీ యు ఆర్ ఎ లక్కీ పర్సన్, రైట్? That is what is my conclusion. నక్షత్రాలు రాలిపోయి చూడగలిగాము అంటే obviously you are the lucky ones, because generally very few people can see that one. So those who are constant observer, those who look at the sky constantly, right, daily building పైన కాసేపు టైం స్పెండ్ చేసే వాళ్ళు ఎవరైతే ఉన్నారో వాళ్ళు మాత్రమే కనిపిస్తూ ఉంటాయి. బట్ యాజ్ ఆన్ టుడేస్ డేట్, సో ఫోన్ తోటి టైం సరిపోవట్లేదు, ఇక పోయి స్కై ఎక్కడ చూసుకుంటూ కూర్చుంటాం, అంత టైం ఎక్కడిది, అంత థియరీగా ఎక్కడిది, రైట్? So the moment talking about the case of your James Webb Telescope, this is one particular telescope which is related to study the origin of universe. That is one thing. How the galaxies are forming, how the galaxies are disappearing as on today completely. At the same time, how the new stars are born. కొత్త నక్షత్రాలు కూడా ఫామ్ అవుతున్నాయి. So how all these particular things are taking place even today. Now there is one particular saying that there is no end to the universe. Universe is ever expanding on your end. There is no end to the universe. Now how this particular universe has come into existence? So regarding all these particular things, this particular James Webb Telescope is being launched. Now at the same time, the moment talking about the case of James Webb Telescope, so where it is positioned or else where it is placed and Pro. So now this is the case of the sun. Nothing but the center of the universe and the center of the universe. Right. Now as on today's date, this particular James Webb Telescope is positioned or else is placed at one particular point wherein this is the case of your sun. At the same time, this is the case of earth. Now the gravity of the sun and earth will be balanced at one particular point. Earth is also exerting some gravity. Right, even sun is also exerting some gravity. Sun exerts gravity on all the planets which are present in the universe, or all the 8 planets. Now it is because of the gravity that is exerted by the sun, all the planets are continuously, they are moving, they are orbiting around the sun continuously. Okay, well, the moment the sun stops exerting gravity, then in that particular place, okoka satellite, okoka planet, okoka direction, it starts moving away. ఫ్యూచర్లో అది కూడా జరుగుతుంది, ఖచ్చితంగా జరుగుతుంది అది కూడా. సో వెన్ ఇట్ విల్ టేక్ ప్లేస్ అని అన్నప్పుడు, వెన్ ద హైడ్రోజన్ నియర్ ద సన్ ఈస్ టోటల్లీ కంప్లీట్లీ ఎగ్జాస్టెడ్, పుట్ ఆఫ్ యువర్ మొబైల్, రైట్? వెన్ ద హైడ్రోజన్ నియర్ ద సన్ ఈస్ టోటల్లీ ఎగ్జాస్టెడ్, At that particular point of time, nuclear fusion will not take place, and the day the nuclear fusion stops, then in that particular case, the gravity of the sun will slowly decrease. And at that particular point, the sun will turn out to be either a black hole, or else it may turn out to be a white dwarf. White dwarfs in the sense, white dwarf stars చిన్న చిన్న నక్షత్రాలుగా మిగిలిపోతాయి, or else it may turn out to be a black hole. That particular day, that is the end of our solar system. That is the end of our solar system. So here in this case, where is this particular James Webb Telescope positioned ani ante, the point or is the place where the gravity of the sun, the gravity of earth are balanced. That is what is known as the Lagrange points ani antam. So in our solar system, we have got almost around 4 to 5 Lagrange points, and as on today's date, this is positioned at one Lagrange point, which is nothing but L1 ani antam. So from this particular place, James Webb Telescope is analyzing the formation of the universe, at the same time formation of the galaxies, at the same time how the stars are forming, how the stars are disintegrating. It is studying it from this particular Lagrange point, which is known as L1 and the place where the gravity of the sun and earth will be balanced. That is known as the case of the Lagrange points, right? James Webb Telescope. You people are totally saturated, right? Then how will you sit from morning 9 to 5 or 9 to 6? Basically what my opinion about Andhra people or Andhra students is that, so you people have got loads and loads of patience when compared to the case of Telangana people, right? Andhra lo, in case wherever I go, right, morning 8 o'clock class starts, evening 5 కి ఆపేస్తే సార్ ఇంకో గంట సేపు చెప్పండి సార్ అంటారు. I'm talking about exclusive, I'm talking only particularly about the case of Andhra. మార్నింగ్ 8 కి స్టార్ట్ చేసి ఈవినింగ్ 5 కి ఆపేస్తే ఇంకో గంట ఉంది కదా సార్ అంటారు. లేదా ఒకవేళ 4:45 కి ఆపేస్తే సార్ ఇంకో 15 minutes ఉంది చెప్పండి సార్ అంటారు. And you people are totally exhausted by 3 o'clock itself. Right, not even 4. Chalo, may istam. Right. The telescope is the result of international collaboration. The telescope is a result of international collaboration between NASA, European Space Agency and Canadian Space Agency. The telescope is a result of international agreement between NASA, European Space Agency and Canadian Space Agency. Right. Then what are the goals of James Webb Telescope? The first one, to look back around 13.5 billion years, 13.5 billion years to see the first stars and the galaxies forming. To look back around 13.5 billion years, 13.5 billion years వెనుకకు వెళ్ళి నక్షత్రాలు గెలాక్సీస్ ఎలా ఏర్పడ్డాయి, ఎలా ఏర్పడుతున్నాయి చూడడం. To look back, or else to look back around 13.5 billion years to see the first stars and the galaxies forming. Second one, to compare the earliest galaxies and the present day galaxies, to understand how the galaxies are formed over the billions of years. Third one, to see where stars and planetary systems, to see where stars and planetary systems are born. Fourth one, to observe the atmosphere of extrasolar planets. Extrasolar planets. In the sense, మన సోలార్ సిస్టమ్ బయట ఉన్న ప్లానెట్స్ ఏవైతే ఉన్నాయో వాటిని స్టడీ చేయడానికి. రైట్. నెక్స్ట్ వన్, the James Webb Telescope will be observing the James Webb Telescope will be observing infrared radiations, will be observing infrared radiations covering between 0.6 to TO2, 0.6 microns to 28 microns, 0.6 microns to 28 microns. The Hubble's telescope involved watching ultraviolet and visible light, watching ultraviolet and visible light in the range of 0.8 microns to 2.5 microns, 0.8 microns to 2.5 microns. Right, chalo guys, so this is about the case of the space science, or as a case of your space technology. So tomorrow we'll start either energy resources or as a case of information technology. Anyone in that one? Sure. Guys, how many of you purchased the books, the material? The same old hands? Right, choice is yours. Because it's Indama? No, it is because it is completely based on the case of the permutations and combinations and how it is happening, what happened in the past, in the sense. So you are trying to collect some data as of now. ఆ పర్టికులర్ డేటాని బేస్ చేసుకుని గతంలో ఎలా ఉన్నాయి. సో యూజింగ్ సమ్ సూపర్ కంప్యూటర్స్, యూజింగ్ సమ్ క్వాంటమ్ కంప్యూటర్స్ వీ కెన్ గో బ్యాక్. అది మరి టైమ్ మెషిన్ అంటాం కదా, సంథింగ్ సిమిలర్ టు దట్. Guys, are you aware that it is expected that by September 10th or 15th you are expecting your group 2 notification? Are you aware of that? In the month of September, APPSC group 2 notification is expected. Yes or no?